Hey guys, Dilby here. Welcome back to the channel. So today we've got a banger. We're looking at 90s style tribal tech house in the style of Peace Division. Peace Division are one of my favorite duos from when I first got into electronic music and I first started DJing. They are like one of my kind of grail artists and a big source of inspiration for me to this day. In this video, what I'm going to do is try and recreate their style as authentically as possible, using sample sources from the time, techniques from the time, and basically limiting what I would do. I'm not doing this in my production style. I'm trying to do it in their production style and see what I can gain from there. If you do like this kind of music, I would suggest checking out stuff from Mexican Avenue, Saeed and Palash, DJ Vibe, basically everything on Twisted America. If you like the track in the background, it's a new one of mine. You can go check that out. There's a link in the description to Beatport and Spayfied. The support was always much appreciated. And if you want to grab the project files from this video, there's a link in the description to Patreon, which is one of the best ways that you can support the channel. Now let's take a little deep dive into the background of this division so you can set up the premise for this video. Okay, so who are Peace Division? Peace Division are a UK duo made up of Clive Henry and Justin Drake. They're known for tribal tech house, and previously they were doing more traditional 90s tech house. They were closely associated with labels like Low Pressings, NRK, Huge Tunes, and Junior London. Low Pressings was actually Clive Henry's label. In order to determine their approach to music production, I went through as many old interviews as I could find. Unfortunately, these are pretty limited, but I scoured the internet to find as much information as I could. In an RA interview, Justin Drake explained their production process as follows. We generally start with some loops, throwing stuff in until we get a good blend of percussion. It's important for us to get a good drum track to build on. We tend to get grooves together really quickly and then spend a lot of time on the arrangement. In terms of the actual gear that they used, I referenced an interview that Justin did with When We Dip. We worked in various studios with different equipment. My preference was to use samplers for everything. That would have been Ensoniq, then Akai S3000XL. For effects, it would have been the Boss SE50, Alesis Quadraverb, Ensoniq DP4. So basically, a selection of workhorse samplers combined with some mid-tier digital multi-effects units. Unfortunately, none of this specific gear has plug-in versions that I could find, so I went ahead and used the Arturia effects collection, as it has some really good recreations of like traditional classic digital effects plugins. These include the Lexicon Reverb, the Pitch Shifter 910 digital pitch shifter, and the Eternity digital delay. In terms of sample sources, I've used a selection of sample CDs that were available at the time. The specific packs I used are Ubershawl, Loop Essentials, Zero G Data Files, Best Service, Housemaster, and Best Service XX Large Club Edition 3. I also sampled extensively from vinyl, using a combination of drum loops, vocals, stabs, one-shots, and various other sounds. For example, the foundation of the drums on their iconic Brooches remix is sampled from an old soul track. So that's the background that's gone into building this project. Now let's get into Ableton and see how I did it. Alright, so here we are inside Ableton, and this is the project for Tribal Tech House in the style of Peace Division. So first things first, I did some referencing, some pretty extensive referencing. I've got a bunch of tracks here. I basically looked through a bunch of their different records to see if I could identify any kind of common themes or common production techniques, arrangement, whatever. Basically just so I could get a feel of how they did things. So these are the tracks that I use. Got the remix of This Beat Is on Twisted America.
Piece all of my body. This piece all of my body.
A remix of Chris Lum and JJ's Roots Roll Call. Their iconic Walk For Me. Their remix of Rui da Silva, Touch Me. And their track, Shake Your Faith. And their track, Deeper on Junior London. So what I was trying to understand there is like how their drums worked, how their arrangements worked, how they used different kind of samples of instruments and different kind of sounds. They're kind of, I guess, like melodics, although they're tracks don't have a lot of kind of melodic parts in them. Walk For Me, they have this riff here.
Walk for me.
This like do, although that's actually pretty uncommon. They kind of just used a lot of little effect sounds or like one shots with delay on them and that kind of thing, which, going back to the research that I did, that kind of tracks with what they said that they did. So first things first, I got a kick drum and I've sampled this from one of their tracks. You heard it in the intro. Let's have a quick listen to what I've done. So that's the beat that I've done. First things first, the kick, I've sampled it from one of their tracks in the project files, which you can download from Patreon if you want to get in and have a look at this. In the project files, there's 5 kicks that I sampled from different records, and I did this, in terms of the actual sampling, or the way that I did the sampling, I did it in a more rudimentary way. I've actually just kind of sampled some chunks of different tracks and then used the filter and the filter envelope to shape those into just kicks. So there we go, big chunky kick. Now, they did say that they start with drum loops. I started by finding a drum loop, which was this tribal percussion loop. So I had that and the kick. So that's kind of like the foundation of the drums. It kind of implies the groove and everything. And then what I wanted to do was build up the drums using one-shots like they might have done in a sampler. So this is, the way that I've tried to produce this is as close as possible to the way that they would have done it, right? I'm not using any fancy techniques. I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible. So these different drum loops here represent the evolution of the drums as the arrangement gets built up. So you can see here, they're more simple through to more complex. I've just numbered those to make it really easy to understand what's going on. So in terms of the elements that we're using, I've basically used a combination of one-shot samples and little parts isolated from loops. Conga. Right, so here, this 2 congas and this clap have come from a sample of a track from BT Express called Do It. Now this is how the drum loop sounds. Very cool drum loop, but I didn't want to use a full sampled drum loop in this because I want to just avoid that, and because you can download the project files, I don't want to be giving away loops of someone else's copyrighted material. But we're using some one-shots because we're also trying to be authentic. Then we've got some one-shots, clap, snare. So these are all sourced from the sample pack so these one-shots are all sourced from the sample packs I mentioned. In terms of how I've used these, I've used the drum sampler in the drum rack, as it's kind of like the most simple version. I wanted to just kind of keep this as simple as possible. So in terms of like EQing the drums and stuff, I've for the most part just used the filter inside the drum sampler just to keep everything as like simple and consistent as it might have been on one of these sampler units that they used. Now we've got a couple of cool crashes here. That one's nice, it's got some phasing on it, and this one's got like a kind of shout or something underneath it, like very nice. I think I've heard that in some tracks from this era, to be honest. So with the kick and those drums, and then of course we've got the tribal percussion. In terms of the kick, I've got it going over a 4-bar pattern, and at the end I've got this double kick. Now this seems to be something they did a lot. Sometimes it was over every 2 bars, sometimes every 4 bars, but it was actually a big part of their low end. So the bass lines weren't as dominant as they are in modern tech house. They weren't mixed as loud, and this kick really kind of helped with the low end groove. Also, these samples, these loops, would have a decent amount of low end in them. Maybe we could even put a bit more in there. Now I've got this other Atmos perk, and this is kind of playing two roles. It's filling out the track in terms of atmosphere. It's actually quite a cool percussion loop. If I go show in browser, we can hear it here. Really, really nice. But with that, it fills up, kind of takes up too much space in the track. So what I've done is put a auto filter on it with an LFO, so we can see the auto filter is opening over 2 bars. So it's kind of got this like low end rumble, and then it's letting through some of that atmosphere. So it really helps to extend the loop, because now we've got something that's moving over the course of 2 bars. And then in the break here, I've also like opened up the filter just to create a bit more atmosphere and space. So I'll play that with the kick and the drum rack. And then let's add in the tribal loop. Now finally we've got this shaker loop. This is actually a more extensive loop. I show it in browser, it's got a bit more going on in it. And I've just filtered out all the low end so that we're basically just getting the shakers, but we do have a bit of bleed of some of the more low and mid frequency stuff, which actually helps to make it feel a bit more authentic. This stuff was not produced in the kind of super analytical way that modern music is produced. Things were a bit more rough and ready and a bit more raw sounding. So this shaker loop really helps to build things up. Now you'll notice in the arrangement, we're kind of starting out very simply and progressing here. This is not just to do with making a short loop for a tutorial. This is really the way they built up tracks back then. Things would come in slowly. If you look, most of these tracks are up to kind of 8 minutes long, which wasn't actually that for this kind of era, wasn't actually that long. Other tracks in the similar styles were often like kind of 8 to 10 minutes long. Also the BPM, I've got this at 126. If you notice, their kind of BPMs ranged from 128, 127, 125, yeah, somewhere in that range between kind of 125 to 130. Now, a really big thing that it made such a difference for the drums. And this was like, when I made these drums, I just thought, they don't sound right, okay? So what I've done is used the D16 Decimort 2. As I said in the start, I was trying to use the Arturia effects collection for everything, just to try and be consistent and use the same source. But this was something I couldn't recreate. Basically, I've used this MPC 60. So this is a bit crusher. It's a really kind of unique and really cool plugin that kind of downgrades the sample quality and gives things this really crunchy texture. So I'm going to turn it off. I also got one on the kick, so I'll turn that off too. Let me just play it and turn them off. Super flat, right? Now with them on, it sounds huge and a lot more punchy, a lot louder, but I've actually loudness matched them. So I really tried to make sure the effect was actually just doing what the effect does. It wasn't just making it louder and therefore sounding better. So it just adds a lot to those drums, and that really kind of helps to recreate the effects of using one of these old school samplers. The other thing that I've used on here is the Lexicon digital reverb from Arturia, the bit of dry wet using a percussion plate. So that really gives the drums a much more spacious feel, and it's got this quite like in-your-face digital reverb feel to it, which is exactly what they would have been using at the time. Okay, let's get into the bass. For the bass, what I've used is a sample. Pretty nondescript, ugly sounding bass tone. This is how the bass sounds by itself. Very simple, right? I've got a bit of processing on there from this distortion. It's a guitar pedal emulation. I looked at what the actual effects units that they were using contained, and I noticed that they would generally contain a combination of delay and reverb, modulation effects like chorus, flanger, phaser, and also some kind of guitar amp emulations, or distortion, saturation kind of thing. But generally, these boxes were designed for guitar players. So what I've done here is used a guitar amp emulation. It's just adding a bit of tone to that, basically. I went through in the MIDI here and kind of worked out what some of their basses were doing. They're, for the most part, very simple. These are all in the project files. And then I kind of just did a trial and error and tried a bunch of different things in the style of what seemed like something they would do based on analyzing the other tracks. And then, yeah, this is what I came up with. Very simple. We're in the scale of A minor. So you can see how that double kick kind of works. It's like adding quite a lot of intensity in the low end. Now we've also got another bass sound, which is just happening on the downbeat of every 2 bars. Playing the root note. Sample source is this. So like a kind of quite cool resonant bass sound. Again, some distortion. So in these tutorials, I normally try to use the built-in Ableton effects. The problem with that for this one particularly is that I'm trying to be really era appropriate, or like true to the era. So I've tried to use plugins that are actually modeled on plugins that were around at that time. Some of the Ableton ones are a bit too kind of clean and, well, like they sound too good, right? I also wanted to use like the same effects over and over again to emulate the idea of just having a very limited range of effects to choose from. Let's bring that into the fold. So pretty simple low end, and like I said, the bass is not super loud generally, but we do get a bit of kind of groove and roll from these loops. I mean, to use this in a more, like to make something that sounded a bit more modern, you would probably want to crank this bass up by about 5 dB. But it just wasn't that loud at the time. Now, Melodic Elements, as I said, pretty simple. What I've done is, so I like analyzed what they were doing in the reference tracks, and a lot of the time it was just kind of one shots with a lot of delay or different delay, reverb, modulation effects combinations, and that seemed to be pretty much across the board. So what I've done here is created this like atmospheric stab. Let's have a look at the sample source. All right. Now we've got a pretty extensive plugin chain. First thing I've done is with this utility, I set it to just the left channel. If I play it like this, on the right hand side it's got like this really heavy sub note, but on the left hand side the sub note's gone. So it just helps it to sit in the track and not mess with the low end of the rest of the track. And it's a simple solution, you know, you don't have all the detailed digital EQs where you can kind of look at the waveform and that kind of thing. Now I've got some distortion again, really bringing up the highs. Flanger, I guess it's actually kind of subtle. but it's like adding a bit of movement, and each time it seems to be a bit different. Now I've got this Lexicon reverb, same setting but with a lot more dry wet, or a lot more wet. Now I've used the pitch shifter, which is a digital pitch, and like a emulation of an old digital pitch shifter. So that really kind of gives it this like wonky, weird, old feeling. Really cool. This plugin is really nice for creating these like subtle, weird movements in things. It's kind of, some of it feels kind of like a chorus, but a little bit more intense. Then I've got this Delay Eternity, which is a digital delay emulation. Really cool. It's got 2 delay lines, a bunch of different delay modes. So you can have ping pong, pan, dual serial, which means that it goes from one to the other. Dual mode that I've got happening here means that there's 2 delay lines happening simultaneously. You can set the mode, just kind of like dictates the way that it's going to sound, especially when if you're changing like the feedback and things. So if you change the delay time while it's on repitch mode, it will repitch the sound. Okay, I've got a filter section and a bit crusher section. So really, really cool plugin. It was actually the first time I've used this, and I will be using it a lot in the future. And then I ran it through this Pro 1973 preamp, which is basically an emulation of a Neve preamp, which is like adding some volume but also some brightness and aggression to it. And I figured if they're recording things, they've got to be doing it somehow, whether it's through a desk or through maybe like a small rack mixer, like one of those old Mackie mixers or something. But generally those things had a bit of EQ and could be driven a little bit. So that was my kind of thinking for being able to introduce this into the plugin chain. Now we've got a pad. So I kind of got the idea for this from one of the reference tracks. It wasn't something that was in everything, but I needed to kind of take ideas from those reference tracks and combine them into something original, right? So it really helps as like a riser effects as well kind of thing. So add some atmosphere. Again, it's a sample. It's already got that nice phasey unison effect on it. I've played it with the root note and then the fifth underneath. So the root note plus the fifth. And let's have a look at the effects chain. I'm going for a reverb first to create some kind of length and space around it. And then adding this digital chorus on top, which helps to add some kind of more movement and more of that kind of phasey sound. And then I'm just using the filter to open this up. And with the automation, I recorded it by hand just to give it a little bit more of a humanized feel that you know, I don't think that they were using, they didn't say that they were using like a computer where they could sequence things in with like automation lanes. Now we've got this resonant pluck. So it's basically just doing the same pattern from Walk For Me, but with a different sound that I could find in the sample sources that I was using. That is one thing that was quite interesting. I kind of decided that this is where I'm going to get the sounds from, and I was limited to that. So I really had to kind of go through and just find what I could. It made me make some choices of sounds that I wouldn't otherwise have made. And it also kind of made me be a little bit more creative with, you know, so this stab, for example, you know, doing sound design with effects and doing things like putting reverbs before distortion or reverbs before chorus to basically like extend the sound, make it longer. This one I wanted the sound to be quite short. And then I've used this delay again. This is an interesting preset because sometimes it's quite loud and sometimes it's very difficult to hear. So I'm not sure exactly why that is, but maybe that's just how things were with these old digital plugins. I don't know. I'm not sure exactly how that's happening or what's creating that. So you can hear that bounces along quite nicely with the bass line and the drums. It's quite low in the mix. It's just like a kind of subtle texture that adds to the groove and helps the track develop. All right, let's have a look at these vocals. So I've got some one-shot kind of phrases that I found.
Open your mind.
And again, I've used this digital delay.
Open your mind. Open your mind.
Just really helps it to sit in the track. We've got this other one.
To the rhythm.
So you'll see here I'm using the envelope just to chop out the first bit. I could have done it using a drum sampler or something like that, but it was just easier this way. I don't know. I guess maybe I probably should have used the drum sampler to keep it more authentic, but I would have just ended up doing it in the same way that I did the other ones. But I would have just ended up doing it in the same way that I've done the drums anyway. So then we've got this laugh sample. So in terms of effects on this to the rhythm.
To the rhythm.
We've got delay.
To the rhythm. To the rhythm. To the rhythm. To the rhythm.
And reverb.
To the rhythm. To the rhythm. To the rhythm. To the rhythm.
So you notice I haven't put like reverb on everything. I'm kind of like in a more modern production process, I would try to use the same reverb on a send and kind of, be making everything to sound kind of a bit more realistic. Like the reverb would be trying to emulate the same space, and I would have the same reverb on everything so it sounds consistent and tight. In this case, I haven't done that. I've done it a little bit more ad hoc, added reverb to some things, added a lot of reverb to some things, less reverb to some things, and it's kind of adding up to this like inconsistency that somehow makes it sound more authentic to the time. Now, in terms of the laugh, I've got delay, distortion, and reverb. Right, so the delay and the reverb help it to not cut off at the end. The distortion gives it that kind of like guitar pedal crunchy vibe. And that like helps to add atmosphere to the track. Okay, now in terms of effects, I kind of went through and analyzed the reference tracks a lot to try and figure out what type of effects they were using. And I was kind of surprised they were using quite a few different types of effects. They'd normally have a few different things in each track that they would reuse, but I went through and kind of found some things that fit with the style that they were using. Like there were some kind of bleepy laser type things. It's a pitch LFO, but also based on what they said, they likely weren't creating these. They were likely grabbing these from sample packs, right? So that's what I've done. And I've added some delay, helps to extend it out, add some panorama, some width. Got this one, it's actually really cool, and I've got no effects on that. So this one here, I actually sampled from a Peace Division track. It's from Shake Your Faith. Let's crop that, and then I've got a delay on there. So I've got this EQ because it's got a kick drum in it, I think. Yeah, so there we go. I've also got the decimort on each of these groups with the MPC 60 setting. So that's really helping to give everything that kind of grittiness, but in a uniformed way. It's recreating the fact that we were using the same source, the same sampler for all of this production. So what are my takeaways from this? Basically, that using loops does not have to be like a limitation. It's not something that there can be a stigma about it, that you're not a real producer. You know, iconic producers have been doing it, you know, for the last 30 years. So since sample CDs existed, or since sample packs existed. Another thing was that having limitations in terms of where you're getting your sounds from and what you're using to process them with, like, can really help to stimulate creativity, but also like it helps with the decision-making process. Essentially, like, the process of producing a track is a bunch of small decisions in sequence. And if you don't have to think, right, which delay plugin am I going to use? And I've got 30 or something, you know. If you just go, this is the delay plugin that I'm using for this track, it takes away all this kind of second guessing. So you can just make these decisions a lot quicker. The same with the like sound selection. If you're just looking in a limited number of sources, then it's a lot quicker to make those decisions. And you kind of look through and you go, okay, well, that's what I've got. So I'll just grab this one and then do some stuff to it and see how it sounds. So having that kind of, having that like reduced pool of sounds to pick from actually helps you to be a bit more creative and just kind of get into that flow state, I found. Another thing that I've taken from this that I think can help me, it's something that I know but I want to remind myself of, is like the importance of simplicity. You know, you don't need a million sounds to make a track that's cool. It's about the vibe. It's about kind of doing a lot with a little, making all those sounds kind of count. Also getting that kind of raw and gritty sound in there. I think maybe incorporating a bit of that into modern productions, so having this kind of juxtaposition, I think could be really cool. So there you go. That is some old school throwback tribal tech house in the style of Peace Division. You can grab this project file from Patreon. I'm going to freeze all of the tracks that have got third-party plugins on there, so even if you don't have them, you'll be able to grab the audio and you'll be able to go and get the MIDI and see what's going on there. And any of the samples that I've used here will also be in that project, so there's plenty that you can get from there. There's also loads more over there on Patreon, so make sure you go check that out. Alright guys, there you go. That's Peace Division, it's 90s tribal tech house. Let me know, what did you think? If you like these kind of production videos, check out this. I think we're going to like it, and so does the YouTube algorithm. Well, that's it from me today. We'll catch you next time. Peace!